meine Lieben, das war's erstmal mit der Hexe und mit der Spinne. Solche, die den Anfang verpasst haben, das Ganze kommt noch einmal vor dem nächsten Turnier um 6:45 und ganz des Nachts beim Tavernenspiel auch hier wird die Hexe sich dann persönlich in die feurigen Lüfte begeben. Dann bis später. Adieu. Dankeschön.
Spider-Woman, climbing the web of shadows. Imagine a city where shadows stretch long, skyscrapers loom tall, and danger lurks in every corner. High above the streets, Spider-Woman navigates a colossal web woven between towering buildings. But this isn't just any mission. Tonight, she faces an enemy who's just as skilled, just as fast, and just as dangerous. Will she be able to untangle the web of shadows and bring the villain to justice? Get ready for a high-flying adventure full of breathtaking stunts, heart-pounding action, and stunning visuals. You won't want to miss a second of this. Stay with us to witness the ultimate showdown between hero and villain in Spider-Woman, climbing the web of shadows. Trust us, the twists and turns ahead will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the city was bathed in an eerie orange glow. Skyscrapers towered above like silent sentinels, their glass windows reflecting the final rays of light. Between two of these steel giants, an enormous cobweb stretched across the urban canyon, its shimmering strands twisting and dancing in the gentle evening breeze. Dewdrops clung to the threads, refracting the city's lights into tiny, iridescent rainbows. At the heart of this massive web was her, Spider-Woman. Clad in a form-fitting suit of red and blue, her silhouette was unmistakably feminine yet powerful. Her muscular frame moved with grace, every motion smooth and deliberate. The web patterns that adorned her costume seemed to blend into the surrounding strands, making it hard to tell where she ended and the web began. Her mask concealed all but her lips and the sharp line of her jaw, giving her an air of mystery, while her long hair billowed behind her in the wind like a banner of defiance. She crouched low on one of the thicker strands, muscles tensing as her eyes scanned the vast web. Every inch of her body was attuned to the vibrations rippling through the webbing beneath her fingers. Something was coming, something dangerous. Her fingers dug into the silken threads, and with a burst of energy, she leapt, flipping effortlessly from one strand to another. The world blurred around her as she spun mid-air, her hair trailing like a comet's tail. She landed lightly on her feet, her toes gripping the web as if it were solid ground. In the distance, the city hummed with life. Honking cars, distant chatter, and the soft buzz of electricity running through the grid. Yet here, suspended between skyscrapers, it was like a different world. The web felt alive beneath her, every strand humming in tune with her heartbeat. Spider-Woman's thoughts raced as she navigated the intricate maze of the cobweb. She had been tracking an elusive villain for weeks, one who could manipulate webs just as she could. But unlike her, this shadowy figure used their powers to ensnare the innocent, to trap the weak. Tonight, she would put an end to it. As she moved, her eyes caught a glint in the distance, movement. Instinct took over. She crouched and launched herself again, performing an acrobatic spin mid-air, her body twisting elegantly as she navigated the fragile architecture of the web. Her fingers danced along the strands, reading the vibrations like a spider waiting for its prey. The figure appeared suddenly, a blur of motion, darting through the shadows. They wore a suit darker than the night itself, blending into the web with disturbing ease. They, too, were a master of the threads. But Spider-Woman wasn't intimidated. She leapt again, this time with more speed. Her muscles coiled like springs as she shot toward the shadowy figure. In the air, her legs extended, twisting her body into a perfect somersault. The moment her fingers touched the next strand, she knew she had them. Her adversary turned, their movements fluid but panicked, and she smiled beneath her mask. Got you. The battle that followed was a blur of movement and tension. Both figures danced across the web with impossible agility, flipping between strands, launching attacks, and dodging strikes. Their bodies twisted and spun through the air like dueling acrobats in a deadly ballet. Every move sent ripples through the web, causing it to sway under the weight of their combat. Spider-Woman's focus never wavered. She could feel the rhythm of the web, every pulse and tremor beneath her fingers and toes. Her opponent's movements were becoming erratic, their strikes more desperate. She knew it was only a matter of time. With one final leap, she soared through the air, catching the faintest glint of moonlight on her suit. She landed on the strand directly above her foe, wrapping her legs around them and twisting her body with a sharp, decisive motion. Her adversary gasped as they were pulled off balance, falling into the web's embrace. Spider-Woman moved quickly, weaving strands around the villain in a blur of motion. In moments, they were cocooned, helpless in the very web they had sought to control. Breathing heavily, Spider-Woman crouched above her captive, the city's lights twinkling in the distance behind her. She glanced down at the subdued villain, bound tight in the iridescent strands, and a sense of quiet satisfaction filled her. "You thought you could use the web to trap others," she said, her voice low but firm. "But tonight you're the one who's caught." As she stood, the last of the daylight faded, and the city was left in twilight. Spider-Woman took one last look at the intricate cobwebs stretched between the towering buildings. It glowed faintly, a reminder of the power she wielded, but also the responsibility that came with it. With a final, graceful leap, she disappeared into the night, leaving the web and the city behind. Just a whisper on the wind, the spider in the shadows. Wow, what a ride! If you loved watching Spider-Woman in action as much as we enjoyed bringing this story to life, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps our channel grow and reach more fans like you. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell to never miss another epic adventure. We've got tons of exciting content on the way, so stay tuned. And hey, why stop here? Click on the next video to keep the action going. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Welcome to the deep dive. You ready to spin a web with us? This time, we're taking a deep dive into the world of Spider-Woman.
It's always exciting to see a new take on a classic character like her.
Absolutely. And you guys sent us some really cool stuff this time.
Yeah, it looks like we've got our hands on what seems to be a treatment for, maybe a movie? Or could be a series, even.
Ooh, interesting. So we're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain of what could be a Spider-Woman origin story or something.
Possibly. It's not a complete story, but there's enough here to get a good feel for this version of Spider-Woman.
Okay, so what's the first thing that jumps out at you when you look at this material?
Well, the first thing that struck me is how visual it is. They waste no time in dropping us right into the action.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Skyscrapers, shadows, webs spun between buildings. It's all very, classic comic book imagery.
Definitely. And they really emphasize the verticality of the city, don't they? The way she moves through this concrete jungle, it's like she's dancing on air.
It's giving me serious splash page vibes. You know, that classic comic book panel that just draws you right into the action?
Totally. It's like they designed this whole world with visuals in mind.
And speaking of how she moves, this Spider-Woman, she's not just strong, she's graceful. Like, insanely graceful. They describe her movements as smooth, deliberate, elegant. It's giving me ballet vibes, even in the middle of all this action.
It's almost like she's mastered her own body. It's not just about brute strength with her. There's this real sense of control, of precision in everything she does.
Totally. It's like she's not just swinging through the city, she's a part of it. Like, the web is an extension of her, not just a tool.
Exactly. They even say at one point that she moves as one with the web. I thought that was really interesting. Like, it hints at a deeper connection than just, oh, I can shoot webs.
Okay, so we're getting a feel for Spider-Woman and her world, but things can't stay peaceful forever, right? There's got to be some conflict.
Right, because what's a hero without a villain?
Yeah.
Right. And they don't disappoint. We're introduced to another character, and get this, they can control webs too.
Oh, snap. Talk about a tangled situation. What did you think when this new character showed up? Did you see it coming?
Well, it's kind of a classic storytelling move, isn't it? You pit two characters with similar powers against each other and see what happens.
Yeah, it's a good way to explore their differences, like what makes them tick.
Exactly. And in this case, it's really interesting because, yeah, they both have this power over webs, but the way they use it. Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, spill the tea. How do they use their web slinging for evil?
Well, the text describes it as a means to ensnare the innocent, to trap the weak.
Whoa. Okay, so not so heroic then.
Definitely not.
Right.
Right away, you get this stark contrast between our assumed hero, Spider-Woman, and this new web wielder. They both have this unique ability, but their choices, their motivations couldn't be more different. It's like a classic good versus evil setup, but with this added layer of, wait, they both do what?
Right. It makes you think about, like, what leads someone down that path? Do their powers influence their choices? Or is it something deeper, you know?
That's a question for the ages, right? Like, does
Yeah.
absolute power corrupt absolutely? And this setup, pitting these two web slingers against each other, it's the perfect way to explore that.
For sure. So, okay, we've got our web-slinging villain. Now let's talk about the good stuff, the fight scene. What did you think? Because from the description, it sounds intense.
Intense is an understatement. They describe it as a deadly ballet, which I thought was so fitting.
It really captures it, doesn't it? The grace and the violence all mixed together.
Right. And it's so creative, the way they use the webs, the environment, everything becomes a weapon.
It's like they're playing 3D chess up there on those skyscrapers.
Seriously, it's not just about punching and kicking. It's about using their power strategically and the way they weave in the cityscape, the shadows, even the reflections of the city lights in the webs.
It's like they turned the city into a character in the fight.
Exactly. They really created a whole world in those few paragraphs. And speaking of creative, the way Spider-Woman ends up winning this whole thing, it's not about brute strength at all.
Oh, yeah. It's way more clever than that. She uses her opponent's momentum against them, right?
Yeah, it's almost poetic, the way it's described. Wrapping her legs around the villain, twisting, using their own weight to bring them down. It made me think, is the writer trying to tell us something about her fighting style? Like, is it all about using minimal force, outsmarting your opponent rather than overpowering them?
Ooh, that's a good catch. It definitely seems intentional, the way they describe it. And it speaks to her character, too. Like, this isn't just a web-slinging brawler. She's thinking ahead. She's strategic.
Totally. And on that note, remember that line she delivers right before landing the final blow? Something about her opponent being trapped by the very thing they tried to control.
Yeah, that line was awesome. It's like such a classic superhero trope, right? The whole idea that your greatest strength can also be your weakness.
Totally. Like their ambition, their need for control, it literally backfires on them.
And it makes you wonder, what did that control even mean to this villain? Was it about power over others? Or was it more about, like, needing to feel secure? Or something else entirely?
Right. Like that one line just opens up a whole can of worms about their backstory, their motivations. It makes you want to know more about them, even though they're the villain.
That's what I love about this source material. It gives you just enough to get you hooked, you know?
It's like a single panel from a comic book, but it hints at a whole universe of stories, you know?
For sure. So, okay, we're nearing the end of our deep dive here. We've got a pretty good sense of this Spider-Woman, her powers, how she fights, her whole deal. But I gotta say, I'm also walking away with a ton of questions.
Oh, tell me about it.
Like, who is this villain? What's their story? And what about this city they're fighting in? It seems like it needs a Spider-Woman for a reason, right?
Yeah. Like, what kind of threats is she facing on a daily basis that we didn't get to see in these excerpts?
Right. It's like we've only scratched the surface of this world.
That's the mark of a good story, though, don't you think? It leaves you wanting more.
Absolutely. It's like the writers have given us these puzzle pieces, and now it's up to us to fill in the rest with our imaginations.
Well said.
This deep dive has definitely left me wanting to see more of the Spider-Woman, that's for sure.
Me too. And, you know, it just goes to show, even the most tangled webs can be unraveled with a little curiosity and some good old-fashioned deep diving.
Couldn't agree more. And that, listeners, is a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and as always, happy deep diving.